Thanks for joining us today on Cece and Doc Talk, where we talk about everything under the sun. You never know quite what you're going to get, but you'll always be entertained. Hello, and welcome to Cece and Doc Talk, where today we are going to continue our series on Courageous Money, Your Adventure Through Money National Park. It so happens to be a book that Amy and I wrote a couple of years ago, and it really talks about the relationship that we have with money. And so today we're going to delve into a little bit of the money messages that come up for us and how they shape all of the things that we do in our lives before we get into Money National Park.
Absolutely. Because, when you think about it, money touches everything. Everything's driven by money. Our emotions are affected by money. Our values are rooted in money. And money impacts our values. Money impacts our emotions.
Our family lives are impacted by money. Our medical lives are impacted by money.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the root of all evil is in money and greed, At least I've heard that before. But anyway, if you want to know how money's or how relationships are, just add the layer of money and you'll kind of see how the relationships, unfold.
Like when somebody in a household makes more than another person in a household.
Yeah, all of a sudden, or,
the balance of power.
Relationship with siblings, and all of a sudden there's inheritance. Let's see how money impacts the relationships.
Or when one person in a household knows all of the information about the money and handles all of the finances, but the other person has no clue what's happening.
Right. That is not a good scenario.
No,
in fact,
absolutely not.
If I could say that there's a purpose to this entire book and this entire series, it's to avoid and get people out of that exact scenario, because really it comes down to a fear. The person who doesn't have the awareness and understanding is they're afraid of, or don't think they have the knowledge, skill, and ability to venture into that space, or they've been kept from it because it's a controlling situation. And so no matter what way you look at that situation, it's not good.
Right.
And it usually doesn't end well.
Well,
right?
and interesting that you brought that up, because one of our friends recently, her husband had a stroke, and then she got into a car accident. And all of a sudden, it sort of brought some of this to the forefront. And she said that, it actually was a good thing, because they recognized that they need to do some planning for, the tragedies in life, for the possibilities of something happening to one of them. And I shared something with her about we have what we call a croak book, which is what we encourage other people to have. It sounds terrible. We lovingly call it the croak book, but I shared that because, when I got diagnosed, I mean, we kind of had a mental croak book, but we didn't have all of our bases covered. We had a will, we had those kind of things, but we didn't have all our bases covered. And so I shared this concept with her, and she said that her husband handles most of the finances. So, there are pieces of their world where she's in the dark, even though she's a very savvy businesswoman.
Well, absolutely.
Relationships sometimes.
It has nothing to do with education or ability. It absolutely, there are people who are, I know somebody who's actually in the finance world, and because they're in the finance world, they let the spouse at home take care of all their finances because they don't want to be involved because they're exhausted by it. And they're very smart in that area. Right. But they're like, what am I doing? And they had no idea what was going on.
Right. And so it's just these kind of scenarios come up every single day.
Right.
And that's, one of the
And what's in our croak book, ours is not very long, but it does list what's where and who to contact to access or get to, whether it's a life insurance policy or a savings account or a 401k or an investment account, just something. What do we have for checkings? What do we have for savings? Where are they?
And passwords.
And passwords,
things
at
like
least,
that.
Or where to go to get passwords.
Well,
just so that.
And when you were in the corporate world, it was, who to contact in human resources, because you worked in such a large corporation. I would have had no idea, if something happened to you.
Yeah.
Who the hell do I talk to?
Yeah. Who's the contact person for the main point of contact for our accounts?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So it's just, it was 1 or 2 pages, and what do you have where? So that if something happens to one of you or both of you, that, people aren't scrambling when they're in probably a time of grief, it's the wrong time for that. So It's just making it easier. And so, really the whole purpose, again, we just talked about how money is tied to all of our emotions. and to our values. And so we want you to be aware of how money sparks your emotions and your behaviors. And we want you to be harmonious with these emotions and behaviors, right? And so you know that you're doing it and you have peace of mind around it as opposed to fear around it. So if like if you let me take charge of the investments, it's not that you're not in the know of where they are and what's there or how to access it,
Right.
but you have peace of mind and you're harmonious with that decision because, if I'm doing it, then you know what's happening, or I keep you informed or get your approval first or whatever. We have conversations around these
Well,
things.
and as long as we have a strong trust relationship, which doesn't always
That's
exist
true.
either, right?
That's true. Yeah. So, taking a look at how your routines are linked with your relationship with money, whether you're avoiding things or leaning into things or controlling things or sharing things or have that level of trust there, but really to take a look at, all your routines. Now, how do we go through this Money National Park? And I do want to talk about, last time we said there are 3 things money can't buy, and that's self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence. And, so just a moment on those. And then we're going to talk about your movie. So, and
Your money movie.
your money movie. And maybe it's best to talk about the money movie up front, and then we'll talk about the 3 things money can't buy. The money movie is all about scenes and clips of when and how you learned the value of money along your life. And again, all the stops in Money National Park are going to have story sparks, which are like conversation starters for you to think about the scene that comes up regarding specifically that question. What did you do with the first paycheck, or what was your first job where you had your own money to spend? But we'll get into some of those at the stops.
Or what's your earliest memory of money?
What's your earliest memory of,
earliest memory of learning the value of money?
Yep. Or what did you see happen in the household that was related to money? So we're going to get into getting you to think about them. So it's interesting. I know that Don Miguel Ruiz in the book, The 4 Agreements, he even talks about how we behave with movie clips and how we have movies and scenes in our head. And how he explains it is, you go into a movie theater and there's all these different options of, the movies for you to walk into, and you decide to go in one with that has your name on it, and there's only one person sitting in the theater, and you sit down and you start watching the movie, and you realize that you recognize all the characters in the movie. These are your brothers and your sisters and your parents and your friends and your colleagues and your aunts and your uncles and whoever it is. And the person that's sitting watching this movie is you. And you realize that you're watching you and how you are portrayed and how you want to be seen in these various scenes that you're watching in the movie. So you decide to leave that movie theater and you go into the next one, and you realize that the person watching the movie is your mother. And the scene up there is she's the main character, and you recognize the various characters in the movie, but now you see yourself in the movie, but it's her version of you in that movie, and you may not even recognize, because
so the
now
scenery is similar, but
the scenery is the
but
same.
The movie is different.
It's a totally different movie, because all of a sudden she's now portraying she's now only seeing in her movie how she wants to be portrayed,
From
and how
her
she
perspective.
thinks she's being portrayed by others from her perspective, and how she sees you, and you're thinking back to your movie going, well, that's not how I was portraying myself in my movie. Or, the scene was totally different regarding the whole scenario. And you could do the same, right? You could go into the next movie theater and it's your loved one, and you see now how they are portraying themselves and how they see you. And all of them are so different again. And then you take the exact same scene and you put the layer or the filter of money on top of that. And what was the underlying message or the fear or the emotion or the value that where money was related in that scene? They're not even the same, right? And so what we're going to do is encourage you to have your clips, your movie clips, but with the complete understanding of that other people in your world may not have, and probably don't have the same perception
right?
of that scene, that exact same scene as you do. And so your job there, when people are sharing and you share the stories around these scenes, is for you to be open, to listen, to be curious, and to learn from it, because you will learn that there's a totally different perspective.
Which is why the whole point of this book was to tell stories about money and to share those stories so that you could hear all the different sides of the same story, because this really does bring home the point that, there are 3 or more sides to every story, right? Yours, theirs, and somewhere in between.
Right. And yeah, right. And then somebody else's perception of it. Exactly. Totally different. So really, to come back and cycle around, when I say there's 3 things money can't buy: self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-worth. And self-confidence is the measure of your own abilities, your knowledge, skills, and abilities, and how you perceive how well you do in those areas. And self-esteem focuses on your sense of self. And, what do you think? What do you feel? How do you believe about yourself? These are your self-beliefs. And then self-worth is knowing your value. And that's, are you lovable? And, that's necessary in your world, and all those I am statements, the affirmations. So this is who I am, and I believe I am worthy. And to build these 3 skills really takes, whether it's self-affirmations for the self-esteem part, or whether it's with self-confidence, it's being put in situations where you're challenged by something and having the knowledge, skill, and ability to get out of it, and as opposed to somebody just jumping in and saving you, and to build that. And so, again, we're focused on the whole being financially savvy or fiscally fit, is for you to have that self-confidence in the area and surrounding finances. And
to be able to be self-sufficient and independent if you need to be. Like some people choose to be right off the bat, but in other situations, a major life event could occur, and then you would have to be, even if you haven't chosen to be prior to that, you might have to be self-sufficient. And so all of these things lend themselves to you being more self-sufficient, confident, and independent with money.
Absolutely. And so we talk about money messages. These are our core beliefs around money that we have adopted. And but the thing is, you can change them. And knowing that you have the power to change these and bring in a different belief, that's where the power comes in for yourself. And so, sometimes people, may not relate to money. And by the way, I have to say here, according to the U.S. Census, 80% of married women will outlive their husbands. And that's a lot of women outliving men.
It is.
And so, if you have a self-belief of, the money message of the man takes care of the money, I don't have to, I don't want to, I know enough to get by. My kids will take care of me. I don't do math. I'm more of the wine expert, not the finance expert. Any of these self-limiting beliefs that you have, that you're going to have to reevaluate. And you may have to then say, okay, which are serving me and which are not? And you have the power to then change that.
Well, and again, part of the point is to be able to go back and examine, where did these beliefs come from to start with? So let's say, for instance, that somebody has the belief that money is the root of all evil. Well, that's often something that might have come from an upbringing in a very religious household, for instance. And is that really your true core belief, or is it a belief that was sort of projected upon you and then you sort of adopted because you didn't really have any other frame of reference for that? And so now what we try to do in Courageous Money is to be able to give you the opportunity to examine that and decide, yes, that's absolutely valid. I'd like to keep that belief, or no, that's a self-limiting belief for me. And I'd like to either revise it or replace it with a new one.
Absolutely. And again, like you say, you have the power to do that.
Right.
And it just takes courage. That's why it's called Courageous Money. Isn't that wonderful how it just cycles back to that?
As if we hadn't thought of that before.
Right. Another resource that I want to bring in is Melinda Gates has a book, The Power of Lift. And in that, she stated, if you want to lift a society up, you need to stop keeping women down. And you and I changed that comment about, if you want to rise yourself up, you need to stop holding yourself down.
Right.
And so this is really
because it's not just women.
It's not.
It's not.
It is not. And this is about giving you permission to raise yourself up in these areas and recognize the skills and knowledge that you do have.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what level you're at. We all have some ability in these areas.
Right.
So, all right. So we're going to get into Money National Park. And we're actually going to get into the first stop today. And the first stop is Money Mindset Mine. And this is all about what you are born with, whether it's your temperament and
your personality, your communication style, things that are somewhat ingrained in you from the time that you're born, and
then how that kind of puts a filter over to how you perceive things.
Right.
But there is one thing that we haven't done yet, and how Money National Park works is, first of all, you have to pay an entrance fee.
Yes.
And so everybody's going to have to pay the entrance fee. And the entrance fee is, you have to come up with what 3 words come to mind when you think about money.
So feel free to pause the podcast here if you'd like and just write those 3 words down.
What 3 words come to mind when you think about money? And there you have it. Okay. And so then, thank you for paying the entrance fee. Even if you had the access pass, you had to show your pass to get in.
Welcome to Money National Park.
Welcome to Money National Park. And so what this is going to look like is we're going to give you a story spark, which is a conversation starter. And then, we'll read through a bunch of questions. And then you will then decide which questions relate to you the most, which ones you're thinking about, where did the movie scene pop into your mind? And then once you kind of have that scene in your head to go, is there a money message here? Take a moment and evaluate it that is serving me, or is there a money message that is not serving me that I need to change?
And during this time, it's appropriate to stop the podcast as often as you'd like during this and take any notes that you need. In fact, it might be a great time to grab a notebook, because one of the things that we will also encourage is that once we have done this with you, that you then take this same exercise to maybe the family dinner table, or to your next conversation with a best friend.
Or while you're driving in a car, or whoever you're in the car with. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's all about sharing stories. And so we're going to give you the means to share those stories. And then we're going to ask you to not only share your story with others, but to get them to share theirs with you.
Yeah. All right. So let's describe the scene. What is the money mindset mind? What are the 4 different mindsets? And where do they come from? So they are the 4 mindsets that we might have are saver, spender, investor, and the giver.
So saver, spender, investor, and giver. And I'm sure everybody can get a picture in their mind of what those people look like, right? Saver, spender, investor, and giver.
Yeah. So, the saver is really the one that, has some values around security or loyalty, credentials, family, justice, those types of things. So they're saving. And, the traits is, they're good organizers. They like to make the rules. They take charge of the situation. They like to, I'm saving this for that. So it's very purposeful. In terms of, sometimes they can be responsible, very direct, in control, structured, time focused, fair. So, those are some of the kind of the traits that might come to mind when you think of a saver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, so do you want to then some of the traits for the spender?
The spenders are the entrepreneurial folks. They're kind of non-conforming. They definitely know how to take risks, sometimes calculated, sometimes not. They tend to be influential, inventors. They have lots of great ideas. They generally value freedom quite a bit. And, they tend to make things happen. They're the folks that start franchises, right? They don't just become a franchise. They don't just buy into a franchise. Yeah, they actually start the franchise. So they're very visionary. They definitely see the future. And sometimes if they're under stress, they can lack a little bit of empathy, or, they might even exaggerate in order to influence you or to get you to invest in whatever their idea is, because they don't mind spending your money either. In fact, they sometimes rather spend yours than their own. But they are definitely, fun folks and definitely very invigorating. They definitely get the conversation moving.
Right. And they spend money to do the experience around it. Yeah.
And they operate from their gut. And then there's that investor, and they are definitely more the analytical, logical thinkers. They like to process information. Data is very important. They tend to be researchers, very intelligent. They can be very sarcastic or just completely, unemotional in their delivery of things. And then, they have, they really value not only their intellect, but other people's intellect. They value history and retrospection. What was this trend and how does this trend impact, the next trend, et cetera, et cetera. And then, they definitely can provide, what's nice about them is they can provide multiple different approaches or scenarios for problem solving. And they tend to work well independently if necessary. Research, they believe, is the key to good investments. Now, under extreme stress, they might get stuck in an analysis paralysis mode because there's never enough data to make a decision. They may talk down to people, especially if they're frustrated by something or God forbid, if you're not understanding them, they may talk down to you. And they may also just be in their head just a little too much.
No, that wouldn't happen.
So curiosity question, would you put yourself in the box of saver, spender, giver, or investor?
Yep. So we haven't explained the traits of a giver yet.
Oh, well, there you go. All right. Your turn.
Oh, all right. Well, givers can be very caring, thoughtful, empathetic, generous, accepting, spiritual, kind of compassionate individuals. They're really good at giving, obviously, giver, right? So philanthropy, they have a lot of grace and gratitude and family and sacrifice. They have really good intuition. They like to bring people together. They have big hearts. They do things from the heart. They do things with a purpose. And sometimes, under extreme stress, they may do things out of guilt or get overwhelmed. They might require some validation. They could even be a little bit more passive aggressive. So I want to cycle back. We didn't talk about the savers. The first one, when they're under extreme stress, those savers that really like to make sure that they're tucking it away for security in the future and the family or the whatever later. Under extreme stress, they can be a little over controlling in that area, opinionated, and they just don't want to hear it. So they're not necessarily the best listeners. So.
Sure. And as you're kind of deciding, what bucket would you put yourself in? I just want to share a couple of things, which is that, your money mindset is tied both to your temperament as well as your values. And, your temperament is kind of the personality traits you were born with. Your values, though, are sometimes changeable. Some of them are inherent and some of them are learned and some you might have adopted over time. But all of these things shape your money mindset. And then recognize that you may gravitate toward more than one money mindset. So you may be able to relate to the spender and the saver, and so you don't have to just choose one bucket. Some people might be able to relate even to all four. And that your mindset, it's really kind of an integral driver of your behaviors, and it will influence your communication style as it relates to money. So take a moment and just figure out, where do you see yourself in this scenario? Are you the saver, the spender,
the investor,
or the giver?
List off all four. Yeah, sorry.
Saver, spender, investor, and giver.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of. I'm definitely the. I'm the spender and the investor.
Yeah, I was going to say saver, but I think you're more investor than saver. So yeah, spender, investor.
When I spend, I spend big, but then I don't like to do the nickel dime spending.
Yeah, you don't spend little amounts. You're really cheap when it comes to
super
small dollar amounts, but you're incredibly extravagant sometimes when it comes to the bigger amounts.
Right, because
so it's a good thing that you
invested to make that happen.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing that you have the balance of investor to make up for the outflow.
Yeah. How about you?
I am, I think I'm a little bit of both too. I think I don't know. Well, okay. So typical, if you tuned into one of our earliest podcasts on real colors, you will know that I am the comedian in the real colors I'm the comedian in the real colors. Oh my God. I'm the chameleon. So I'm all four colors equally. And I would say that I sort of relate to the money mindsets the same way. I can see the spender in me, the saver in me, the investor in me, and the giver in me. And maybe that does make me a comedian as well as a chameleon.
I do see all four in you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Depending on the day. Sorry.
I'm like, you're spending how much on who? You're that giver side of you, because I don't have that giver quite as high. And then I'm like, oh, okay.
You're very generous, but like I like to do the gift giving thing.
Right. Yeah. Which then ties into the 5 love languages, which is a different podcast.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
How
All right.
many
Let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So some story sparks in this area for you to think about. Which money mindset most resonates with you? So what's your mindset? The saver, spender, investor, giver. And, how do your money habits reflect this mindset? And so to be able to answer the question as a blank, saver, spender, investor, giver, I enjoy doing what? Or I don't enjoy doing what? Mm-hmm. And so the story that best describes me being, saver, spender, investor, or giver, or any combination of them. So what is the story that best describes
you being a saver, spender, investor, or giver?
Yeah.
Or the combination of.
And that's the movie scene that appears in your mind, because now we should all have movie scenes popping up of, when we were that saver, spender, investor, and giver.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then also your money mindset is your belief regarding what money is for, its purpose, whether it's saving, spending, investing, and giving. So how is this true for you? And then if you're traveling with others, so let's say you're going to take a trip with others, or if you're taking a trip with others, let's say you're in the car right now or on a road trip. In fact, if you're on a road trip listening to this podcast, just pause the podcast for a second and have each person share what they think their money mindset is, and then discuss how are you different or the same in your thinking? What values do you share? Where do you find common ground in making decisions? And how can you see each other's traits as an asset? So I'll read those again. You're going to share how you're different or the same in your thinking, what values you share, where you find your common ground in making decisions, and then how can you see each other's traits as an asset?
Sounds like a great conversation to me. We should stop and do that ourselves. Yeah. All right. So after you do this,
I think we did
go
when we
through
wrote
it
the book.
individually and collectively with people, to then be able to take a look at, okay, what is serving you and what is not? And is there anything that needs to change? Is there a self-limiting belief in there where you expected to be one, but really at your core, you're not? Do you really think that you are an investor? You just don't have the knowledge and skill. And so there are so many ways for you to be able to get that, and start small and start with the basics, but lean into that. And being an investor is a really cool thing. And it does, you start small, start somewhere, be willing to take risks and learn it and step into that space.
Right. And then this is where we really identify those money messages, and the money messages can be summarized as your lessons learned, your key insights having to do with money, your relationship with money, or how money has influenced your thoughts and behaviors in regard to this money mindset.
Yeah.
And then, this gives you the opportunity to affirm that money message. So, we're going to ask you, to figure out, what is your money message here as an investor, a saver, a spender, or a giver? What's your inherent money message? Do you like it? Do you want to keep it? Or do you want to revise it? And by the way, you can't just cast these things aside because they're so ingrained in you. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm just not gonna abide by that
being more aware of it." So you're consciously, and then again, trying to be harmonious with these, be in harmony.
Exactly.
With what it is.
So know that you either need to embrace it or replace it or revise it. You can't just cast it aside and ignore it. Right.
All right. Yep. Well, I think that's enough for today, and that's a good wrap. And at the next podcast, we're going to stop at the next stop in Money National Park, which is Fountain of Youth. And Fountain of Youth is all going to be the money messages that you learned growing up from your parents, relatives, and influential people, whoever is part of your circle of friends, whether it was a zip code that you grew up in. And so it's all about money messages you learned when you were young as a youth.
Thank you for joining us today on CC and Doc Talk, and for this series on courageous money. We like to say we're changing the way we talk about money one story at a time. So in between this podcast and the next one, be sure to share your money stories.
Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to CC and Doc Talk. We'd love for you to follow us on social media at CC and Doc. That's CCNDOC. And you can visit our website at ccanddoc.com. We also take monthly donations to support this broadcast if you're so inclined. We'd love to hear your comments, suggestions, and questions, and we'll do our best to respond. Thanks, and have a fantabulous day.